Welcome everyone to our latest Caterer.com Leadership Collaborative session. Today we'll be exploring the importance of employer brand as a vital tool in attracting and retaining top talent in what is clearly a strongly candidate-driven hospitality market. And that goes for every employer in the sector, regardless of their size or their location. There's something in this session for everyone. I'm Kathy Dybel, I'm Brand Director at Caterer.com. I'm delighted to be joined today by an expert panel who'll give you insight and expertise, plus tips and actions you can apply directly. I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment, but to begin with, I'll just explain what we're going to get out of today. We'll be delving into the latest insights from Universum to understand the true impact and benefit of building and nurturing your employer brand, and then we'll be chatting to the panel to gain their views on why employer brand matters and what they've been doing to grow and market their employer brand. So before we go any further, let me ask the panel to introduce themselves. Let's start with Steve from Universum.
Hi, yes, hello everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Steve Ward. I'm UK and Ireland Director for Universum, which is the world's largest insight-driven employer branding agency. Pleasure to be here.
And Martin? Oh, Martin, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute there. So hi everyone, my name's Martin Jones. I'm Head of Talent Acquisition at the Restaurant Group. I oversee talent acquisition for our head office functions and our leisure and concessions division, which encompasses our Franklin, Benny's, Chiquitos, Firejack's, small brands, and our outlets within transport hubs, which is sort of predominantly in the airports within our concessions business.
Fabulous. And Suresh, lastly?
Hi everyone, my name's Suresh. I'm the People Director at Wahaca Mexican Restaurants. Lovely to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. So lots of expertise in the room and we will get straight into it. But before we do, I just want to give a bit of context on why this is so important right now and a couple of views on how it impacts hospitality. So, I mean, obviously as an industry, we've talked about the challenges of our poor employer brand and poor sector brand for decades. So anyone on this call probably is fully aware of that. I know I am. So labour shortages and poor retention have long served as a backdrop for hiring in the sector. And, you know, we've reached new heights of struggle now, haven't we? So I think as we speak, there are something like 134,000 open vacancies in hospitality at the moment. And, you know, while skills gaps exist across many sectors, even globally, there's no doubt hospitality has lost countless employees and is struggling to attract the talent that it needs. And you can't run a great hospitality business without great people, so it hits where it hurts. So, you know, what are the solutions? Seek support from government? Yes. Push for changes in education? Yes. We've been doing that for some time, and whilst inroads have been made, you know, it's perhaps hopeful to think that things will make a difference in the short term. So if hospitality remains an unappealing sector to potential candidates, either because of their inexperience, that they might have had a poor experience, or there's a misconception around the pay, the conditions, the opportunities, perhaps. So what are we going to do about that? And yes, the sector can and will come together to address those issues, and there are fantastic initiatives out there. I'm sure we'll touch on some of them later. But my personal view is that hospitality has to relaunch itself as a brand, and candidates are our customers. And therefore, every single employer in the market needs to think about what they need to do in that space. Whatever size you are, whatever budget you have, however size your workforce is. And that's why today, to me, it's so crucial to have this conversation now, because back to that point, without great people, we can't run great hospitality businesses. So that's my little contextual view. And then what we're going to do now is hand over to Steve. Steve will give us some fantastic insights into the importance of employer brand and how it can be approached, and then we'll go into the panel discussion. So without further ado, over to you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Great intro and a great truism of the states of the challenge at the moment, and hopefully I'll try and address that through what I present here today, the best I'm able to. What I want to do here, hopefully everybody can see, yes, I can check that you can see my screen okay. I want to look at the Universum, as I sort of alluded to a minute ago, I emphasized insights-driven employer branding agency, and that's because the balance of what we do is driven by, yes, we do employer branding programs and targeted communication strategy for organization across the globe, but we do it through insights. We're also a research company, and we interview and research and survey talent every year, deep research into what are the behaviors and needs and drivers of talent in the year in which we're living. And so obviously this year, and so what I'm going to share a little bit of today is stuff that hasn't actually been shared yet. It's not actually public until next week. So certainly it's stuff that I'm going to give you some little previews for about the latest research and how it affects and impacts the hospitality sector. Just a little bit to start with of what is our employer brand. Your employer brand is the way talent perceives your organization as an employer. And of course, that actually, very much as Kathy alludes to, that also is industry. The industry is, comes in this as well, because often we're seen quite similar in this particular industry in hospitality, but it's around perception. It's what people believe it's going to be like to work there. And that is derived, as you can see there, by things like perception of how you care for your employees, perceived culture within inside your business, your opportunities to deliver a successful career, the perception of your employee experience, how do you treat your people, and the way in which you communicate to applicants and the way in which you target talent online and otherwise. So there are a number of touch points that people are measuring by, but brand is perception, but is it always the truth? And I want to tell a very quick story about a lady called Kezia, and I still remember her name to this day. I'm winding back about 6 years ago. My partner and I, she also works in talent acquisition. I was working in sort of employer branding strategies and talent acquisition at the time as well, working with organizations on branding and creatives. And we were sat in Byron Burgers in Covent Garden, just off Covent Garden, and our server was Kezia. Kezia was just unbelievable, and we watched her operate as she went from table to table, high pace, high energy inside the restaurant because of how busy it was in a prime part of London, and she never dropped. She never missed a beat. She never missed a customer. She never stopped checking on a customer. She never dropped her smile or enjoyment of what she does, and she delivered the kind of service that we would want to be associated for, the thing that we want to be perceived for. We were, Jen, my partner, and I were a little bit kind of ambitious. We both dropped her, we both asked for a number so we could call her and ask about whether she wanted to come and work for us. Jen in her recruitment team and me and my agency team. And she came to interview for me and my agency team, and we sat down and had a lovely interview. I thought she was absolutely superb. And I offered her a job. And she turned it down. And she said, Steve, I know I could earn more with you. I know that there are opportunities that exist for career within where you are, but it cannot replace the buzz and enjoyment I get from working inside the restaurant, the people contact, the pace, the pressure, the enjoyment, the fact I move and keep alive, and the energy I think I can bring to people's lives by serving them through the bit that we love the most in our life, which so often, which is the food. And so, and I totally respected it. I thought it was a really great decision, and I loved it. And even sort of 6, 7 years on as it is now, I've always remembered Kezia. I still remember her name. I can still picture her. And I thought that was an amazing story, because what it does is my perception was that, she's in a dead-end job here. She's not going to go very far. But the truth was, she got whole enjoyment about it, whole truths about it. So when I paint here, what are the decisions about? Candidates will make their own decision on your employer brand or your culture, but what there are places they're going to find it. And we can see there are obviously things like its career sites and job board profiles and social media content, and your proposition to talent, and the way in which you treat people equally and fairly across inclusion and diversity. But at the bit down the middle is super important in employer brand. It's where you find the truths, the employee stories, and the word of mouth, because the perception can only really be fulfilled by the truths that exist inside the organization. Often what commonly happens in employer brand is we do great things inside our organization, but we don't always tell the story externally as well as we should, and therefore the perception gap exists. And I think this is what I want to sort of try and start to sort of encouraging to think about when we start to think about what are the truths and what are the opportunities inside hospitality sector. So looking into a little bit of some of our latest research, and this kind of paints a fairly sorry story in a way that I think we're aware of, but I think that there's a truth to this, and it's understandable. In our research, we look at where people are least satisfied with their employer and their environment, and at the moment, tourism and hospitality comes up quite high in that, and that's understandable because when you look at the other ones around it, there are also industries that have really struggled in this industry. So let's not worry about this enormously. This is one of those lifestyle challenges that we're going through, but it's a truism that we have to be conscious of. The other question we ask is, will you remain loyal? Do you intend to remain loyal? Do you remain loyal to your employer and your industry? And tourism has to, yes, it's still not perfect. We know it's been a tough era, and people will be leaving and have left the industry during the course of this time. But what it demonstrates is there is a slightly greater level of loyalty in tourism hospitality than there is maybe in other similar industries where the talent is maybe more unsettled. Not only are they not satisfied, but not particularly loyal either. And therefore, what that sort of creates then is this sort of like this where employees, areas that have got employee risk, retail, fashion, accessories, goods, and social care, etc., are areas where talent is more disgruntled, more unsettled, and more likely to jump ship and move into another industry. And remember, one of the great things about the story of the Great Resignation this year and all the things that are happening around that, there are many factors to it, but one of it is what often some people call like a bit of a reset. We're having a bit of a reset in our thinking. And so there's an opportunity for areas around retail and fashion, etc., that we can tap into from a point of view, because they are probably at the highest risk of wanting to move on from their industry and into another industry. Tourism and hospitality obviously gives them a route that is very similar, captures some of those similar characteristics, but is hopefully one that has slightly greater loyalty within it, which is positive. What I wanted to look at briefly, so when I looked inside the data, I wanted to get the perception of the industry. So what are people, the companies who are represented in our research that are in the hospitality sector, I wanted to kind of capture what do people feel about those organizations? What do people feel about the hospitality and catering industry? What you can see here is using our sort of 40 drivers of employee attractive matrix. Here are the top 10, and you can see here there's a lot of things about international, which I think is logical when you couple the hotel sector in this little bit as well. You see things around professional, people see professional training and development here. They see customer focus, good reference, leadership opportunities, some really positive things. So when I look down those 10 things there, what they see in the hospitality sector is some really strong characteristics, really positive characteristics that are people focused, that are customer focused and development focused. And there's a bit of pride in there as well, the good reference for future career and prestige. They see a bit of pride in this sort of industry as well. And I think that's something to capture again with the people side of things around things like team orientated work and the customer focus. So I thought this was interesting. So these are kind of positive, very nice things that you would want to be associated with within the industry. Then what I looked at is the kind of people you would probably want to attract. So I'm talking about people who are already in catering and hospitality, people in retail, people in customer facing areas, charity and hotel services, etc. What I want to look at, what are the things they find most important when they look for an employer? And actually there's a bit of a disconnect, because the only one, these are all extremely positive plus things in life as well, but the only one that overlaps the perception of the industry is professional training and development, the one that's at the top that they want the most. But what they are hoping to find in an employer are things around ethical standards, purpose, a little bit of a career opportunity there, thing around career advancement, security. We know that's tough in this industry right now. It's not a message we can go out very, very easily with, but certainly other areas around respect for people, inspiring leaders, a friendly work environment, which is something that was very aligned to one of the factors that we saw on the previous page, and the way of making a personal impact. And that thing about making a personal impact, that's how I see Kezia. Kezia enjoyed the way she made people feel. So what we see here are lots of examples that look at people, ethics, encouraging positive people environments with great purpose. And I see a lot of the hospitality industry in this, but the perception on the previous page is slightly different. The perception of the industry still positive, but not quite. And this is the skill of employer branding. This is the skill of communicating to talent, is that what we believe, what people perceive is the way that we are, might not be actually the way that we truly are. And it also may not match what talent is actually looking for. And our work with customers and the way in which we would inspire, hopefully, organizations in the hospitality industry as well, is to move us, consider what we saw on the last page, because that's what the starting place, that's what people perceive the industry to be right now. But look at this 10 and go, but what do they want? What are the people that we aspire to attract? What do they want? And then, do we tell the stories from inside our organization through our people and our purpose and our goals and missions as an employer? Do we tell these stories that we see on the page as well here? So very data-driven sort of approach to how things are done, but data is super important, because when we're fighting a tough battle, the aesthetics is going to be enough for us. We need depth in the way in which we think about every communication, and in the way we communicate, whether it's a job ad or whether it's a piece of writing on our careers page, or whether it's the way we represent our people through content, video, stories, social media, and advocacy through our employer. So I hopefully thought that was quite interesting. And just to tell you who, though, in that group of talent that I was saying they are that are within the sort of similar field to you, these are the top 10 employers that they think are most attractive, by the way, in the UK. So what you see here are service orientations, very public service organizations. You also see media in here a little bit, and you see a little bit of charity as well, a little crossover to retail with ASOS. So some similarities there, you know, in the purpose, but at the moment, this is who they're seeing. These are the sort of companies that they aspire to work for the most, that they feel match those characteristics. And what we're not seeing there is companies at the moment in hospitality or in hotel groups or in restaurant groups. And what we've therefore got to learn through this kind of process is, okay, we understand what people are looking for and what they desire and what they need, and we look at the gap analysis between what they see in the industry, and then we have to look at these employers and kind of go, what is it they say that is relevant to those last 10 things on the last page, and what can we replicate? What have we got in our world that is a story that matches anything that a Channel 4 or a British Council or an ASOS can deliver? What is it? Where do we overlap in our own approach to work? So employer branding, sometimes it's very aesthetic, but sometimes before the aesthetic, it needs to be very thoughtful about where our strengths lie and what is going to resonate to people. Why would people want to come and join? So that's taken us into a little bit of our data. The big thing we have to do is influence change in the perception of our industry. And like I say, you know, often the perception isn't the truth. We see perception, it's good, it's actually quite positive, we saw, and the recommendations, but it isn't necessarily all the truths we want to. So looking at it from a micro individual, whether you're one organization, what I would look at is, what are those top features that people want in our target groups, the people that we can probably attract from the marketplace and the industry at the moment, and look at those 10 and then match it up to your organization's 10 most relevant attributes and stories. What are the strongest suits that you've got to deliver in your organization? Doesn't have to relate to the one that's left. It's just think about where you're strong. Where are your initiatives? Where are you striving to be a better employer, etc., etc. And then we do an exercise where you overlap the two to say, what is strong about your organization? Where are those best stories? And how does it match and overlap with what talent actually wants? And then by bringing those two stories together into those two segments, those two circles, doing a bit of a Venn diagram exercise, we then identify what are the overlapping attributes. Where do those stories overlap the attributes that are on the left-hand side? How can we ensure that we capture those attributes in the way we tell our stories? It's not about trying to tick the box of all 10 of those. Nobody ticks the box. We work with so many organizations, and when we look at the top 10 drivers of the employees they are targeting, never ever do does the top 10 perceptions, the top 10 desires ever match? It just doesn't work like that. There are too many nuances in talent and on our own personality. But the goal is to find the 4 or 5 that absolutely are true, that we can tell positive stories that match talent. So this is a very simple exercise that can be done. We do it in workshops, and that's one of my sort of propositions, I guess, to your organizations is we will workshop this stuff with you. But at the same time as well, this is a sort of project you can do yourself from a DIY basis and look at it and kind of go, right, how can we find the sweet spot in our communication, because that's the one that's going to be the most magnetic and the most relevant when it comes down to it. So a little bit of a sort of a, I guess it's a little bit of a tactical exercise I wanted, because I guess right now the challenge for the industry is quite short term. It's quite, there are challenges that need to be addressed now. We could talk about your brand direction, etc., and that could be a medium term and long term story. But right now there's a need to identify, how do we attract talent now? And this is using current data, being able to recognize where it is that you can resonate with talent right now. So basic considerations to get you started on this: understand that the employer brand is perception. Your goal is to evolve perception. It's to change the mind, to inspire people to go, and actually, honestly, sometimes just surprise people. The elements of surprise and joy are the things that really turn people's heads, and that's what we need to do. If we say the same things that we've always said all the time, we're likely to get the same response. So always think about how you can be a bit more imaginative and inspiring in your thought process. Bring joy. The content stories you share, as well as your people, are a reflection of your employer brand. Your people are your advocates, and therefore use your people as advocates. So one of the areas, I think, in and amongst, I've seen the likes of Honest Burgers be very good using their people as their voice, using people as the true stories, using stories that come from inside the organization as stories of how we tackle change and how we tackle cultural change and how do we tackle the challenges of that our talent faces. And those stories are super inspiring and they're real, and it gains employee advocacy because you're using your employees and their real stories as the collateral for your communication, which is a really strong idea. Tell real stories, that's pretty much what I'm saying there. Understand the insights, don't avoid the insights, don't guess what the best approach to the market is. Give yourself some clues as to what is the right way to go about it, because you don't want to go out there tone deaf. Consider the strengths of the industry, the joy. I think I've referred to this already, but definitely I would focus on this: the joy, the service quality, the customer focus, the pride. Remember, prestige was mentioned as well. There's a pride that goes to the hospitality sector in what I see, and I think that's really important to bring out. Use this as an exercise to understand your business. There's an opportunity with something like the employer branding process to navel gaze a little bit, have a look inside our organization, just kind of maybe do some resets, little things about how do we need to change, how do we need to develop, do an internal survey, try and get them how they feel about the organization, and really help yourself understand the way forward and how you can be the most attractive. Because equally, whilst we're talking about attraction here, equally we need to think about how we hold on to talent, and that is equally as important in employer brand. And take a moment to be really sure you're going to be magnetic. Don't just charge out there. Take stop before everything and just go, is this going to work? Is this going to resonate? Have I really thought about what we're saying before we go out? And in simple terms, make it real, make it very, very human. There are so many great stories to tell. Find your Kezia stories. Kezia had that impact on me and told me why the hospitality industry was better than the recruitment or employer branding industry 6 or 7 years ago. You need to find the people inside your organization who agree with Kezia, who also agree and can tell and inspire other people to think about that. So, so hopefully there's some useful stuff from insights and thought processes that will be useful to you guys, and hopefully helpful thoughts moving forward. And if you want to get hold of me, there's my contact details, or contact the caterer, and they can absolutely get you in touch with me as well, whether it be to help in any way, or book a workshop or something along those sort of lines. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you, Steve. I think you're about to go, so
yeah, I'm going to take my screen off.
I absolutely love everything you've said and how you've said it. I hope that the audience watching this now takes some insight from that. But there's more to come. Contact you, as you said. We are releasing an employer brand playbook for caterer.com and Universum, so that also will be available for download soon. So let's continue the conversation with Universum and the sector. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Kathy. Take care.
Okay, so how to top what Steve has said, or more continue the conversation. So Martin and Suresh, thanks for coming back on. We're now going to go into a conversation where we explore your thoughts around employer brand, because what Steve said is obviously, who could argue with that? And it's inspiring, isn't it? Because as a sector, perhaps, I know there's a great deal of pride in what hospitality businesses do and their teams, but perhaps we're a little bit polite about talking about it. You know, there are definitely egos in the industry, but then generally you don't get people who want to shout out about how great they are. And I think that sometimes comes through into talent attraction as well. So let's have a conversation around what employer brand means to you as a starting point. Martin, give us your viewpoint on that. Martin, I think you're on mute again.
Sorry, yes. I think Steve summed it up quite well there. It is the perception of, I think, that to begin with, your existing employees, and then the next step on from that is your potential employees, the potential talent that is out there. And it's about understanding as an employer what you want that perception to be. And I think that sort of starts with understanding what type of culture you want to have within your organisation, the sorts of values that are going to want to underpin that culture, and then how you communicate them and put those into action to actually build an employer brand that's going to land well with what people want, particularly following this sort of last 12-18 months where people's wants, needs, and I guess own personal values have changed. So it's about trying to tap into that and build an employer brand that resonates with the audience that you want to communicate with.
Yeah, that's interesting. I agree about the people's needs and wants have changed, and perhaps they see the world of work differently, their lives within that, the balance between the two differently. Is that an opportunity for hospitality to speak to that need?
Yeah, very, very much so. I think we kind of need to change our approach. Perhaps in the past we've been very focused about reward, recognition, what the individual roles can develop into for the employees in terms of a career. I think now we have to focus on what we can do in terms of helping employees and potential employees develop as individuals, establish a healthy work-life balance, and also provide some support for them as people, and not just the sort of focus around training and development to make them better at their jobs, but to really help nourish them and help them thrive while they're working within our sector.
I agree. Suresh, what's your view?
Similar to Martin and Steve, actually, when someone talks about your company, what's the first thing that comes into their mind? And that's employer brand for me. If I talk about Wahaca, where I am, how do people react? What do they talk about? And I want them to talk about specific things. So that's what employer brand means to me. It's what is always at the forefront of people's minds, what they associate your business with, and that's down to us to create internally and then take it externally.
And so why does it matter to candidates then? I mean, what are they aware of employer brand, do you think, or are they just digesting it?
I don't think candidates, all candidates are necessarily aware of employer brand, but they are increasingly aware, especially in the current market, of what they want from their employers and how they expect their employers to behave and to be when they get there. And that to me is employer brand. And it's all the stuff that Martin said. It's around your values, it's around how you live those values, it's around your culture, it's around the environment and what you're going to find when you join that business. And this is so much more important for people coming into, especially the hospitality industry at the moment, because it's not just about money for them. It's about sustainability, it's about the environment, it's about fun, it's about the engagement of the team. All of those things put together define your employer brand. And yeah, to answer your question, it's really important to these guys, even though they might not see it in those words, employer brand. It's what they're going to come into.
I think that's such an important point for today, which is often down the years we've talked about employer brand a lot, And it seems to me that people often think it's something for people with big budgets and only they can think about it. But when you demystify it, employer brand is perception, just as Steve said, and that everyone has a perception of every business, no matter what size. So then it's the employer's responsibility, no matter what their size and budget, to think about, oh, who am I and how am I perceived by the candidates? Absolutely. Martin, what's your view on that?
Well, I think candidates are having a far more of a focus on what a potential employer can do for them. And as I've just touched upon just a moment ago, it's not just around how an employer can develop them professionally. It's about how they can provide a working environment that's going to nurture them as individuals. And I think from our perspective, we've got to be really clear on how we're doing that. We can't just talk about being an employer of choice or, you know, a best company to work for. It's why is that the case, and what are we doing to establish ourselves as such? And I think certainly within our business, we've got a really big focus around the benefits that we put in place for our employees, so that they actually, it's not just lip service. There's actually sort of physical kind of pieces of value added sort of benefits that we're giving them. There's a few things we've introduced of late, and a few things we're introducing over the next few weeks. Things like free counselling sessions, so that we can support them with their mental health well-being, discounted gym memberships, financial support through various kind of arrangements where they can draw down on their salaries and weekly pay prior to being paid if they're going through difficult times. We're looking at new discount platforms that are really relevant and resonate with them in terms of saving money on the weekly shopping, the uniform, etc. So it's really focusing on what matters to them and trying to actually put actionable things in place that are going to benefit them.
And how have you defined that, Martin? How have you gone about defining, well, which benefits would most appeal, and therefore how you would position your offering and your employer brand to those candidates?
Well, I think Steve touched upon it in his presentation. It's about listening to what your employees actually want, and the initiatives that we're putting in place have come from surveys that we put out to employees to actually understand what's going to work for them and what they want. So it's not just us kind of you know, picking what we think is going to work. It's about listening to what they want and really delivering on that.
I mean, I know you probably can't go into too much detail, but did you get any surprises in that, or were your assumptions kind of correct?
I think probably the biggest surprise was that kind of cash remuneration wasn't actually that high up the list of the things that they wanted. It was more around sort of well-being support, work-life balance, opportunities to develop, apprenticeships, etc. So I think that was probably a little bit of a surprise for us.
I guess the chances are, if your people want those things, then the people that you'd want to employ also want those things. So it's not that you necessarily have to do widespread research to understand. Suresh, how have you approached it? How have you defined employer brand at Wahaca?
Yeah, it's still a work in process, in progress. Do you know what, if you ask me, if you ask any of my colleagues, any of the ops guys, or indeed general managers, what our employer brand was, we'd all kind of have an idea, but be slightly different in the way that we articulate it. So our journey at the moment is really understanding how we articulate that, and to do that, a lot of the things that Martin has just talked about, actually through engagement surveys, listening to our teams, there were, I have to say, there were no surprises coming back for our teams, and I'm in agreement with Martin that money isn't the most important thing. Yes, they do want benefits, platforms, and well-being, access to well-being, and all of that kind of stuff. But in defining ours, we've actually noticed that the people we attract want us as an employer to do far more for the environment. Sustainability is huge on our agenda as a business, and we're actually attracting a lot of people through that. So that's kind of a particular focus area of ours, and we're attracting a lot of people through all that work we do around sustainability. So yeah, to answer your question, it's listening to these guys, and it's listening and not making assumptions, It's trialing things. I'm always trialing all different things in different restaurants, getting that feedback, and if it's right, let's put it in place, and let's keep reviewing it. It's an ongoing process, right? There's no answer that's going to fix it overnight.
So, I mean, you've got a long history in working in the sector, Suresh. So you've looked at employer brand many times over haven't you? So, would you say it's different now? Let's say maybe 10 years ago. What are the differences?
It's very different now, and the one main reason is we are attracting a very different person to our industry than we were 10, 15 years ago. I'm showing my age now, even 20 years ago. And you know, 20 years ago, when I was in this industry, it attracted people who knew they were going to come in, work long hours, work hard, earn some good money, and get the occasional day off, but party hard on their day off. It's not the same anymore. I mean, 3 of my children now work in this industry in different restaurant brands, and that's not what they're about. And to attract them into the brand, it was about balance. It was about getting that work-life balance right. They don't want to work too many hours because they have things that they want to do. They want to, I've already talked about the whole sustainability piece. They want to go to the gym 3 times a week. You know, I never went to the gym. There's loads of things that they want to do now, and these, especially the young guys who we attract, and the young girls who we attract to this business now, which people didn't want to do before, and we have to bear that in mind when considering what our employer brand is, because at the end of the day, employer brand is about putting into place something that is going to be appealing to attract people into your business, right? So, yeah, very, very different 10 years on, in answer to the question.
I think that's so fascinating, because so many people that we still talk to are basing their hiring strategies around assumptions that have been baked in over the decades. And 10 years is a long time. So let's even think 5 years, there'll be further change. Even in a year now, there's further change. So it just highlights the importance of doing what you're doing, which is to listen to your people and truly understand what they're looking for today, rather than thinking, well, I understand that this is the list of things that's going to appeal. So Martin, back to you really. What do you consider to be the most important factors to consider when you're building your employer brand in terms of the process that you've gone through?
I think it's that consultative and that collaborative approach to what you're actually putting together, so that it is relevant for for the audience that you're wanting to communicate with. And I think it really does start internally. So it's about building that employer brand internally, so people really understand what we're trying to create, what sort of organizational culture we have, and what we want to stand for. And then once you've been able to establish that, it's then about communicating that to the rest of the market. And then within that, it's understanding what are the channels that you need to be using to actually access the talent pools that you want to have access to, and what does your story and what does the language have to look like to really engage with those people.
Suresh, your thoughts? What are the most important factors there to consider that you perhaps haven't mentioned already? Is there anything you want to add?
In terms of defining your employee brand?
Yes, so building and defining, yeah.
Yeah, it's very much as Martin said, and there is a process that you need to follow. Albeit you can structure that process. It is about understanding internally what are
I think we might have lost Suresh for the moment, so until he returns to us, I mean, he's luckily frozen in a glamorous pose there, but when he comes back to us, Martin, let's continue the conversation then. So let's think about hiring then. We've talked about the process of defining employer brand, talking to our people. Steve's obviously gone through some of the stages there, and Suresh was starting to touch on them. When you talk about hiring itself, how much do you consider and communicate your brand throughout that process? Because it's a long process, isn't it? Really, there's many stages to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going through a process at the moment where we're kind of analysing the way that we are communicating at the sort of front end of the process, which is through our advertising. And I think if you just look at the sort of media advertising for recruitment across the sector, it's very uniform, and it probably hasn't changed much, as you said, in terms of the amount of change that's gone over in the last 10 years. It hasn't really changed much over that period of time. So it is about sort of understanding what that message needs to look like in order for it to have impact at the front end. And then we've done a lot of work with the communication that then flows through from that. We've recently invested in a new applicant tracking system that gives us the ability to tailor communication at each stage of the recruitment process, so we can build our employer brand through the messaging that candidates are receiving throughout the recruitment process. We're building a very people-centric employee culture within the organisation, and that's kind of born out of our people department. So the way that the people in our people department, and particularly our recruiters, are behaving as well is a big part of us showcasing, you know, what our employer brand values are as people come through our recruitment process.
Because that consistency is key, isn't it? From the moment anybody might come across your first recruitment ad or the touch point that you present to them, right the way through to their first communication with you, their interviews, the hiring, the onboarding, the reality. You know, fulfilling the promises you've made aids not just hiring but retention as well. So it is critical to keep that story going. Suresh, you're back in the room. You froze in a glamorous position a few moments ago, so so we're just talking about hiring, as you can probably gather, sort of, you know, how important it is to keep consistent through that time. Is there any sort of hints and tips, tricks that you might employ to make sure everyone's on the same page at every stage? Because
yeah, absolutely. The hiring process for me is about two things. It's about competency, and it's about values. And our focus is always first on values in all hiring, because it's great if people have got the competency, but if they're not aligned with our values, which we're very strong in terms of our beliefs and our values, there's a chance it's not going to work. So at all levels, we really do focus on those internal values that we have, bringing people in. You know, not to give them all away, but if they're positive, but humble as well. These are the kind of things that we look for. If they're not, then you know, they're probably not going to find it easy to fit in with us. And you know, from a competency perspective, you can teach people stuff, right? If they've got great values, we can absolutely train them to do the job. So that's really important to me. I'd just say as well, and it's on the back of the last point we were on before I froze. Sorry, Kathy. It's really important to consider in our industry as well that we have managers. I have managers who have been in this business for 10, 15 years, and it's really hard for them to understand that the recruitment process has changed. And that's what I find hardest, for managers to be saying, yeah, but this guy's come in or this girl's come in and they don't work hard enough and they don't want to work an extra shift on Saturday and all the rest of it. And we have to educate our managers now to say the world has changed. People have different expectations, and it's quite hard to do that for us. And that's quite a tough bit in our industry at the moment.
That's such a good point. But how on earth do you tackle it? I mean, how are you tackling that? Because that is in itself a culture shift, isn't it?
Absolutely. The only way you can, I mean, I'm in Covent Garden right now, and I've just been sitting with the general manager and head chef going through their engagement survey, and going through the comments in their survey. And there's comments in there about I'm working too many hours, and a lot of positive comments as well. But it's about discussing these with the manager and educating the managers on actually these individuals have different expectations to you and me. So you're never going to bring in mini-me's all of the time, which is what these guys are looking for, right? You're going to bring in this whole different and varied set of people now, like my kids, who don't want to be here every weekend till 2 o'clock in the morning, who want to be, as I said earlier, at the gym and all the rest of it. And it's drumming that message through and giving them the context. And it is slowly getting through that we have to change our expectations of the people coming in. And that's, of course, aligned to that portrayal of the employer brand that we put out there.
Yeah, and you know, that probably applies to every sector. as well. So, you know, there's a lot of discussion around what the problems in hospitality are, and yes, we do have things we need to fix, and that's one of them. But some of them are common to other sectors. Sometimes we're a bit hard on hospitality. You know, it's all our fault that people want these different things. You must know it's just about moving with the times and evolving with the way that the world is now. If you want to hire these great people, whether they be younger people, older workers, whoever, it's about understanding, well, what do they want, and then working to that point. Did you have anything else to add on that, Martin?
I think as well, with the challenges that we have, there's a real need to explore alternative candidate pools as well, candidate pools that we haven't explored previously. I think in the past, particularly back of house, we've always been very keen to find people that have experience. With the shortages that we're having at the moment, it's very, very difficult to sort of keep that as a sort of hard line qualifying factor for candidates. So having to kind of broaden our kind of mindset in terms of what we're able to consider in terms of what good looks like to bring into our business is really important. And as Suresh says, then the challenge is then instilling that kind of that new way of thinking and that kind of open-mindedness into the managers within our business who have been in the hospitality sector for many, many years, and it's a big sea change for them. So it's about supporting that and educating them around the advantages of making that change. So I think that's a really valid point. It's really getting that to land. So it's all well and good going out to these new talent pools, building messages that are going to resonate with those talent pools to attract them, but it's also about educating our managers to kind of value those candidate pools and understand how to interact with those individuals and get the best out of them.
Yeah, otherwise you're driving potential candidates to a blocking point.
Absolutely.
And then again, okay, so it's a work in progress, as Suresh said. It's not something that anyone can fix overnight, but you've got to start now, start at some point to move yourself along that journey. And obviously from an industry point of view that applies, we'll come to that in a minute, but also it applies to every single employer in the sector, no matter what their size or where they are. But how do we know it's going well? You know, how do you measure what good looks like? How can you see the successes? You know, Suresh, do you have any metrics that you've got in place to check you're on the right path?
Yeah, absolutely. So the key thing that there are always stats. Okay, so labour turnover stats, which are you know, extremely important in our business. So looking at trends, looking at how long people are staying with you, the whole 12-week, 6-month piece, more than 2 years, or all of that stuff. And I work on those with the managers every month. We'll go through them. The other key one is our engagement survey. So we run 2 full surveys and 2 pulse surveys over the course of a year. And it gives us a really good snapshot and insight into how people are feeling. And when you understand how people are feeling, they're talking about your employer brand, right? Because they're talking about your business, our business. And I'm quite lucky that people are quite outspoken, and we encourage them to be so, and they see us making changes on the back of it as well. So really important. Those are the 2 key metrics that I use: the engagement survey and of course our LTA stats.
And Martin, what about you? How do you measure success in your employer brand journey?
I mean, it's exactly the same way as Suresh. It's trying to look at our retention figures. It's talking and communicating to our employees. It's engagement surveys, and I think within that, within our business, we pay really close attention to sort of employer brand advocacy. So how many of our employees are happy, but then are also happy to recommend us to their friends, to their family, to other people in the wider market, because that's probably the most powerful way of building strength in your employer brand, is by having employees that are advocates of what you're doing and how well you're doing it.
I guess that comes back to the point at the start, which was candidates are our customers. And you know, just as you would want to understand what your target customer wanted, and just as you would see their feedback, then exactly the same candidates. And you can do that on a large scale if you've got a large set of employees, but you can also do that on a smaller scale. There are always ways of hearing people. Okay, so that's been a really interesting insight into how you operate within your own businesses, and I hope kind of makes it seem perhaps not as complex as you might imagine to start thinking about these things, listening to people, applying those learnings as you go along, and that everyone's as they go along. You know, the big brands you represent, some might think, oh, they've got it all down, but you're still on this journey. It's continual. Let's look at the sector now as we come to sort of last few minutes of the session. Let's look at the sector, because who hasn't had conversations, especially recently, about what are we going to do as a sector to reboot the image of the sector or relaunch it, which is what my opinion is, but then it starts with individual employers as well. So what do you consider the role of individual employers to be in the big job of sorting out the employer brand of the hospitality sector as a whole? Suresh, let's start with you.
Okay, what's the role of the individual for all of us? It's hugely important. This sector is amazing, and it's why I've been in this sector all my life. It is diverse. It is fun. As long as that's the kind of role you're looking for, and anyone can progress in this sector, and that's the thing I love about it most. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what your qualifications are. You can rise up through this industry, and I see success story after success story, which is fantastic. We need to make people more aware of that, and the conversations I've had all my life actually with people who I went to school with, college with, who were in different industries are, well, actually, my managers and myself, when I was a manager, we're actually far more rounded. We know a bit about marketing, we've learned a bit about finance, we know how to interact with complete strangers and make them feel comfortable. We know how to manage teams. We have so many competencies that we skill ourselves in as we progress through this industry. We just don't shout about it enough. And I know we've tried to do this before. Some years ago, we were doing stuff, and stuff is coming out now, but we need to take it seriously. We need to let people know this is a real viable sector for people to come, progress, learn, and become great in. So the more we can do, the better. Absolutely.
So both individually as employers, but also collectively as a sector. Is that what you're saying? Because a lot of people
absolutely
not waiting for someone. I mean, there are, as you referenced, there are amazing campaigns at the moment. You know, Choose Hospitality is one of them. I don't know if you've seen those videos. We've partnered on that project, and it's truly inspiring. But you know, no one involved in that project thinks that's that done then. You know, each employer needs to speak to that story. So absolutely, I agree with you on that one. And Martin, what would you say? What's the role of the employer in turning the perception of the sector?
Well, I think if any hospitality business is going to survive and particularly thrive in the current climate, they've got to take their employer branding very, very seriously. And I think if we all do that individually, I think collectively then we're really going to make some big noises out there about the success of the hospitality industry in terms of the way that we're able to develop. Hopefully, as we move forward, the way we're able to offer a far better work-life balance than perhaps we have done previously. And going back to Steve's comments in his presentation, the sort of job satisfaction that we can give to people. So I think if everyone's focused on promoting their own business, I think there's just going to be so much common ground between the messaging that's going out from each of the individual employers that really will build into some quite significant kind of promotion of the sector as a byproduct.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's end on a little positive note, because this is all quite serious stuff. You know, it's hard work and it's all in a tough direction. You know, times are challenging, aren't they? But at the same time, what are you enjoying about this right now? You know, is there anything you could say, actually, this is exciting, or I'm enjoying this aspect of having to return the whole way I do things? Honestly, is there anything that's positive about this that we should cling on to and focus on as well? Suresh, what would you say?
Yeah, there's a lot I enjoy, or I wouldn't be here, Kathy. Do you know what? That it relates to what I said earlier, the camaraderie and the family, and we call it family here at Wahaca, just the way we work so closely together and have supported each other at all levels over the last 18 months, which has been a fascinating 18 months, is amazing. And we've all come out the other side, and you know, we talk about COVID, we talk about the last 7 months, the lockdowns, as a distant memory. Now we know it's still there, but the camaraderie, it's made people even stronger, and it's brought us together. The guys who we still got left, we are strong, and we've been through a lot together, and it's great to work with these guys. Absolutely.
Fantastic to hear that. Martin, what about you? What's great about things right now?
Well, I think it just provides a kind of really unique opportunity for the people agenda to be front and centre of every business. I know over the years there's always been talk of the people agenda being front and centre, but I'm not sure if that's always been the case. But I think now it truly is. I think particularly in our business, you know, we have the buy-in of the senior leadership team, the board, everything that we're doing within the people team to build the employer brand proposition that we have, or as I say, most importantly, first of all, for the employees that exist in our business, but also for the way that we're then presenting ourselves as potential talent in the wider market. So it's just great to be at the top of that agenda, and I think it means we can achieve a lot in the coming months and potentially years.
Great words, and I think that's, for me, what resonates there is we acknowledge that obviously the lockdowns happened, COVID is a reality, but that's starting to become more of a distant memory. Let's look at this new territory that we're in and how can we thrive within that new territory. And there are opportunities as much as there are, obviously, and always have been difficulties, not to underplay it. But will it be forever, this situation? Do you see this as a long-term candidate situation, or in your opinion, is it we're in a situation now that will come to an end at some point? Suresh?
I don't see an end in the short term, to be honest. We're focusing on the run up to Christmas now, which is obviously a peak trading time. We've got an election coming up at some point. I think things will change after that election, to be honest. I think we are doing a good job. We can do a better job at building our own and bringing people into the industry and through the industry. We need to keep doing that. For me, I'm not going to be naive and think this is going to go away by next summer. I'm really not. I think it's longer term initiatives that we need to be looking at now.
Martin?
Yeah, I agree with Suresh. I mean, it's a really big sea change that's taking place within the hospitality sector, and to be able to get from A to B, it's not going to happen overnight. And I think certainly a lot of the solutions, particularly to the shortage of talent that we're facing at the moment, that we're looking at as business, are solutions that will play out longer term. We're bringing in people that are new to the sector. We're trying to attract people to the sector that have perhaps not considered hospitality before. But of course, what comes with that is then the need to train and develop these people and kind of have some really substantial development programs in there to be able to take them on the career journeys that we can offer them within our business. So I think it's going to take a few years for that to really kind of come through. But I think in the short term, we've talked about a few points already. You know, there's lots that we can do to make sure that we're in a healthy position and that we're in a position where we can move forward. But I think in terms of getting to where we want to be, it's a far longer term goal, because there's such dramatic change that needs to take place in terms of the way that we operate as a sector. Yeah,
I do agree. And you know, from a caterer.com perspective, obviously we're very strong within the hospitality. We're also build our networks to reach outside hospitality too. So, you know, we partner with Total Jobs. We're investing more than we ever have in candidate attraction from all manner of different talent pools in order to fulfill that need, which is clearly not just for the short term but long term hospitality needs to step outside its usual pool in order to bring new people in. And you know, equally, we're investing in helping employers. That's what this is about today, and that's what the employer brand playbook is about, to just simplify these tools so that they can apply them to their own day-to-day hiring processes. So I hope that this session has been useful to those that are listening, and I know it's been really interesting to me to have this conversation with you guys. Thank you very much to Suresh and Martin for sharing your time and your expertise. Also, thank you to Steve, who's no longer on the call, from Universum. If anyone who's watching this wants to speak to anyone on the call, just get in touch with your caterer.com account manager or contact me via LinkedIn, or any of the people on this call will be happy to hear from you. And look out for that employer brand playbook that's coming out soon through our social channels. So thank you very much, guys, and I will see you very soon.
Thanks for your time. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
And you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.